This is a late Kirblog because it's currently 2:30 in the morning on Friday night. I got home very late because I just finished going to a very fantastic event at the Hollywood Bowl. It was my first time ever going to the Hollywood Bowl over in LA. And I got to see a amazing Warner Brothers event called Bugs Bunny at the Symphony. It was this show put on by the Hollywood, the LA Philharmonic, this massive orchestral group that was performing a bunch of music in sync to classic Looney Tune cartoons, and it was a really, really amazing experience. Very well put together, incredibly talented musicians. I mean, some of the best in the world, of course. And we got treated to a bunch of classic, awesome Looney Tunes that I grew up with for many years. And I thought, since I'm kind of on short notice and I need to put something out for, within the next half a day or so of this going up, I figured, why not talk about my experiences and memories with Looney Tunes? Warner Brothers animation is something that's just kind of been part of my life for literally about as long as I can remember, like as far back as I can remember. I always wanted to be a good feather, but I was too busy watching Looney Tunes to do it. But I distinctly remember in my like incredibly early years, I'm talking like 3 or 4, when I would just be watching stuff on Nickelodeon. Because I was lucky in that regard that a lot of channels that I grew up watching would just, have Looney Tunes on. They would just, syndicate them, I guess, and just put them out or whatever. Not syndicate, but they would have them airing on Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, WB. So I remember, I think it was actually on Nickelodeon for a while where I was watching stuff before I'd go to bed, and it would be like, like Rugrats or Doug or like one of the typical Nicktoons you'd expect from, and then they'd have Looney Tunes on at like 7:30, I think, or something. And so I watched those, and I watched pretty much every classic, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck cartoon you could think of for that run. And I remember my earliest. I think this might have been the very first time that I ever had like a favorite character. Was when I discovered the Tasmanian Devil, who I was seeing amongst other Looney Tunes characters in the form of merchandise for a long time. I think before I actually saw him on a cartoon itself. Again, I'd seen a lot of the typical classic ones that you'd see on every Looney Tunes box set that they put out these days. But Taz, I hadn't seen the few original cartoons that he was actually in, even though he was a very popular character, of course. But I would see him in merchandise, and I'd see like pictures of him everywhere, and I was like, "Mommy, I really really like that character. I want to see him." And I'm remembering that it's because of Taz that I learned what weekdays were, because I distinctly remember seeing a commercial. I think it must have been on Nickelodeon at the time or something, but with promoting when Nickelodeon was going to be airing just random episodes of Looney Tunes, and in the commercial, I believe they were using footage of if I'm remembering right, it was the very first Taz cartoon where he is attacking Bugs, and Bugs finds the lady Tasmanian Devil to marry him or whatever. It's just like a quick little whatever cartoon, or I'm sure he wasn't intended to be anything important past that at the time, and he just ended up blowing up and getting really popular. But I digress. I remember seeing that footage, and I was like, oh, that's the episode he's going to be in. Oh, I want to see that. I want to see that cartoon. And I just remember them saying like weekdays at 5 o'clock or whatever it was on Nickelodeon. And I was like, Mommy, what's a weekday? I want to know what day I can tune in to see that Taz cartoon. And she was like, oh, sweetie, weekdays are Monday through Friday. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I don't know when I'm going to see that. And then eventually I saw it, and I was like, oh, this is okay, I guess. And it wasn't as big as I expected it to be. But flashing way later, I ended up seeing Tasmania and got big into that. I might do a separate Kirblog about the Spielberg Warner Brothers cartoons, but I'm talking specifically the classic Looney Tunes stuff. But so I was very grateful that I grew up with that stuff, and I was well educated enough with who the characters were and what the whole score was. Shortly before I got into the Spielberg stuff, like Tiny Toons was airing, and Animaniacs, and a lot of that stuff was. I know that Tasmania wasn't a Spielberg cartoon, but I'm talking like the modern, the 90s, Warner Brothers stuff in particular. flashing forward way later into I think like the late '90s. I'm always not sure exactly like what the typical age range of my listeners are, so I'm not sure how many people necessarily grew up with this stuff. But I grew up with a little thing on Cartoon Network called Toonheads. This was the time when Cartoon Network was having a lot of quote unquote shows that were really just like amalgamations of particular cartoons all put into a like a half an hour time slot or an hour or whatever. So there's stuff like the Tex Avery Show and the Bob Clampett Show and Chuck Jones Show, where they just showcase specific episodes of different, usually Looney Tunes, but sometimes other stuff as well, that were directed by those particular animators, which was a great way to I was like, oh, that was by that creator and that was by this guy, and etc. But Toonheads was something that had this kind of interesting, I guess not really documentary style, but it had this sort of trivia aspect to it. It was on late at night, I think on Sundays, and sometimes I'd just be up watching it or whatever. I'm like, oh, what's going on with Toonheads today? And I'd be laying in my bed and the lights would be off, and I'd be watching it, and the soothing sound of the female narrator who was in 19 whatever. This Tom and Jerry cartoon with him playing the piano was the same thing as this other cartoon of Bugs Bunny playing the piano with a mouse bothering him and blah blah blah. And I was like, oh, and I forget which came first, but that was an example. Which actually that cartoon with Bugs playing the piano and the mouse bothering him was one of the ones that was played tonight at the Philharmonic thing, which was pretty cool. And I remember seeing a lot of those, and I would see a lot of interesting trivia about why certain things in the cartoons came about, and where they were coming from with those. And that might have been, I think that was also just on the cusp of when I was beginning to get interested in really doing animation myself. It wasn't the thing that got me really interested in going for it necessarily, but it was definitely one of those things that kind of ended up being a building block for me, because there was a lot of stuff like that, which again I'll probably talk about whenever I do a Spielberg Warner Brothers animation Kirblog of some kind. But I digress. That was something that I found really intriguing, and I think that definitely was laying down the whole inspiration of I'm fascinated by what it is that it takes to make an animated show, and learning about who a lot of these famous cartoonists were, and what kind of stuff they were doing, and their individual art styles and their writing styles and their execution of the same characters that because Bugs and Daffy and all the typical kind of Looney Tune characters that you'd expect were relatively consistent from creator to creator, in terms of I wasn't so off-put by each of them. They do different things with them, but I wasn't so that's not how Daffy is, that's not how Bugs is. They still felt the way that they were supposed to be for the most part, and most of that I think also was thanks to Mel Blanc's performances being pretty consistent all throughout, no matter what the cartoon was. And Xander was saying, Xander Mobus was there at the Philharmonic, and he was talking about how nobody will ever be Mel Blanc. Even the individual actors that have taken on a lot of those Looney Tune characters, like Bob Urich, the voice of Porky Pig, was at the thing tonight, and he's fantastic, and so are a lot of the Joe Lasky and Greg Burson, a lot of those guys. But Mel just made that those characters were just part of him. So that was a big factor for sure. I'm also remembering, not that this is so relevant or whatever, but I remember I played Bugs Bunny's birthday Blowout for the NES, which is a horrendous game, and I'm sure you've probably all seen the AVGN about it. But I played that for a while just because that was that era of where it was oh, the Looney Tunes are cool and I want to get all this stuff about them. And I had a lot of Taz merch. I remember having a pillow with a cool piece of artwork of him on the front, and then the cursing random key mash kind of stuff on the back of it. I think that pillow might still be somewhere in the depths of my dad's attic or something. I have no idea, but he was always a personal favorite. Speaking of personal favorites, trying to think of specific Looney Tune shorts that were a lot of the ones that were played at the event tonight were actually some big favorites of mine. There are a lot of classic Wile E. Coyote versus Roadrunner ones that came up. There was a little amalgamation of different Pepe Le Pew ones that came out. It's so funny. Like, there's so many. I'm sure people have probably talked about this before, but there's so many things about the Looney Tunes that like nobody would ever do on a kid's animated piece of content anymore. Like, it's just, there's no way. Like, there was the one where it's Bugs and Daffy, trying to out Bugs on their little stage show thing or whatever, that ultimately ends with a gag of him like basically committing suicide, and the joke is like, I can only perform the trick once, and it's like, wow, nobody would ever be allowed to make a joke like that ever again today. Like, just not even on normal stuff, that's kind of a touchy subject, and it's all like, it's a gag, but it's like that's things have completely changed now. And I'm not even just talking like, of course there's also some like the racial stuff, but I mean that was pretty minimal for a lot of those cartoons. Like, it'd only be like once in a while, I think, and they seem to have slid most of that under the rug from what I've seen. That aside, the Daffy Robin Hood is super quotable. There's been a few little moments with Nylock and Tome where I've had a few little nods to that, like the yoikes, send away, and the dodge parry, etc. That whole sequence of him smacking himself in the face was a good one. There's one. I'm trying to remember specifics, but it was a Porky Pig cartoon. I don't remember it being like that good, but I always thought it was like kind of amusing because it was just so goofy. It was not Goofy the cartoon character. Porky like gets in a taxi with this, I think he's like a boxer or a wrestler or something, and he has this really long like Lasky Slashky Splashky Blashky just walked in, chief. Some long ass like weird foreign name like that. I'm sure he was supposed to be a parody of somebody like at the time, but he gets into a taxi with him, and then like something screws up, and he has to like be in the match with him, or he has to fight in place of him, or something like that. I remember it was with the fat Porky, I believe, like the kind of earlier design of him, and I remember it just sticking out of my mind. But if anybody can find that one for me. Also, in terms of Porky, I'm remembering one that was a favorite in college, just because Mike Ruracco, one of the Nintendo Collab animators, and he and I used to quote the from the Caveman Porky. There's a little bit in the beginning of it where there's like a hawk or something, and he sings like, "Oh, these are wonderful days, tra-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la, oh, these are wonderful days." And I remember, I think I did like a typography like animation or something, like the dot video that Mick Lauer and Mac did, something kind of like that for like a school assignment based on that. And it's like, "For these are wonderful days," and with it ending in like, "I could have gotten you on a wholesale." It's like some stupid joke. Yeah, it's weird. Like, some of the ones that I distinctly remember, like, weren't that great in comparison. I mean, some of the best ones, of course, are like What's Opera Doc is amazing and legendary. I feel like an idiot for not remembering, but the one where Bugs is the barber and he's like just messing with Fudd the whole time. That is amazing. And all the different variations of the Wabbit season, Duck season. Bugs and Daffy, I think, are always like in the creme de la creme of like the best ones for sure. Trying to think of some other ones that stood out. Because there's a bunch. What's Opera Doc is probably like my all-time favorite, just because it's so high quality and memorable, and it's also really quotable. Because I think I was sitting next to Bosco, and we were joking about like, oh, they're going to do that eventually, and I totally called when it was going to be the last one of the show. They saved What's Opera Doc for last for the Philharmonic thing tonight, and Bosco was sitting next to me. And by the way, just before I forget, a big thank you to Erin Fitzpatrick, who got us the tickets to go see it with her. Big ups to her. She's fantastic. But he was doing the kill the wabbit, and I just look at him dead in the eye, and I just go, "Kill the wabbit," and I like clutch my hands together like Bugs does in the animation, and just blink twice, and he completely got what it was. So in that way, like it was super impactful, and of course, like with my Spielwald magic helmet and all that nonsense. Which I love that Hey Arnold referenced that with my golden magic slingshot and the Carmen episode. That was pretty great. Something that just came to mind. One of my absolute favorites. It's my obscure favorite, because there's always got to be one of those that like this is the one that's sacred to me, man. is the one with Pete Puma. Because Pete Puma, for short-lived in his, like, whatever of a character, he's like, I just loved how stupid he was, and we used to do impressions of him in college, and me Mike Rocco, and Chris Zito would always do the, like, I'm going to get that little rabbit in the hole, and I'm going to eat him up. We just used to do that all the time. And, of course, I'm very, sad to say that the voice of Pete Puma, Stan Freberg, actually passed away a few months ago, earlier this year in April, I believe. He was one of the great original cartoon voice actors, and I was very, very honored that I actually ran into him and his wife when I was visiting San Diego. I think this was the second year that me and my friends had gone, so it would have been like summer 2009, as we were at like some place getting breakfast like close by the convention center one morning, because we were staying there for like a full week or whatever, and he happened to be there, and I worked up the courage to just go up to him and say, like, hey, I just wanted to say, sir, that I really love your work, and you're a fantastic actor, and Pete Puma is, like, one of my personal favorite Looney Tune characters, and he immediately was like, oh, thanks, you're gonna need a whole lot of lumps. And I was like, oh, my God. So I'm very, very, very thankful that I had that moment, and I met his wife. I unfortunately can't remember her name, but his wife was there with him. She was very sweet, and she was very personable and was totally cool with me and my friends talking to him, so... yeah, I was very happy that I got to do that. Not to go into too dark of a subject, but the Pete Puma episode was a favorite one, because that was another one that me and Rocco used to quote that one a lot, and Zito in college. Even though it wasn't like a super popular one or anything, but it was just a little personal favorite between each of us. And we used to watch a lot of those, I think, in college, because Mike Rocco had like so many of them just like saved as like quick times on his computer, and we just like kind of go through and watch a bunch of the classic Looney Tunes and stuff again. The last little interesting thing I think is worth pointing out too is, and I didn't really think about this until now because it had been so long since I really sat down and watched a lot of these, but we were seeing the credits, the little opening title card credits for a lot of the classic Looney Tunes that were played during the Symphony event tonight. I keep calling it the Philharmonic thing, but that's not accurate. You know what I mean? The event we went to, they were listing the credits, and I was like, my God, these were done by like a crew of people that is about the same number of folks, more or less, that I had on board doing like Tome. There'd be like 4 animators and like 1 background artist and 1 musician, or like 1 composer rather, and like 1 sound guy or whatever, and they just all get together and make these like, and with all due respect, to the people who work really hard in massive teams, but like, cartoons that take like hundreds of people, like giant freaking crews of people to do, one thing, and they don't even look sometimes half as good as any of these classic Looney Tunes. Like, that really says something. And the fact that also, like, not to give, my point of origin, too much credit or whatever, I'm not trying to be self-indulgent, but like a lot of people on the internet that are doing independent projects have very small crews that are about maybe that size of people doing them, and they make amazing stuff. So it really goes to show you, sometimes like bigger isn't always better. But yeah, I mean, I have incredible respect, and I really think that probably more on the subconscious side, the creative folks at Warner Brothers really, got me invested in cartoons at an incredibly young age, and I'm very happy that I had that grounding to start with for appreciating good animation and good visual humor in animation. So on that note, in the comments below, leave what are some of your favorite Looney Tunes, specifically the classic, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, etc. type Looney Tunes. Not going into like Tiny Toons or any of the Spielberg or like modern day Looney Tune Warner Brothers stuff, because I want to save that for another Kirblog at some point, which I will do down the line. But in the meantime, yeah, tell me some of your favorites. Do you have a favorite particular character? Let me know any particular thoughts of yours. I'd love to hear your stories and etc. And in the meantime, if you also have any future Kirblog topic suggestions, leave a comment about that too, or hit me up on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, whatever you feel like, and that'll do it. That's all, folks. I did it.